Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom to those here in person, those joining us online. Happy 4th of July. Welcome, Alex. Lots of things to celebrate today. Sometimes it is the case that rabbis wake up on Saturday morning and they open the door to their apartment and they take in the newspaper and they find that the story in the magazine of the New York Times relates so much to the Dvar Torah that they are going to give that they have to find a way to work that in. And that is what happened to me this morning. It's very affirming. It's like, oh, my ideas are reflected in the New York Times. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's the editors of the New York Times are like, oh, we made it into Rabbi Passow's sermon. I don't know, probably not. But I do want to commend to you the magazine of this week's New York Times, which is a beautiful compilation of profiles called Visions of America, the story of the revolution through the eyes of everyday founders. And it is profiles of people who are not so well known, who were influential in their own way during the revolutionary period in shaping and creating this country and helping it become what it became, and I think also offering the promise of what it can be. And the profile that connects to, I think, this week's Torah portion is a profile of a woman named Elizabeth Freeman, who was a slave in Massachusetts. And she was the first person who brought a court case to challenge the status of slavery. The Massachusetts had become a commonwealth and established and ratified a constitution. And the constitution read, all men are born free and equal and have certain natural, essential, and unalienable rights, among which may be reckoned the right of enjoying and defending their lives and liberties, that of seeing and obtaining their safety and happiness. And so the question that her case posed was, in the new self-governed Commonwealth of Massachusetts, could any person be held as property by another? And the court ruled no. She was successful, and she and her daughter became free. It was a local case. The jurisdiction of the verdict was local, so it took a while before similar cases were brought in the state of Massachusetts and ultimately in other states, and leading to finally the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery in the entire country. But clearly her challenge, Freeman's challenge, laid the groundwork for that broader change. And I think that her story is connected to our Parsha this morning in what its implication for what it says about the nature of law, which is another message that we get in the Parsha with the story of Benot Tzlofchad, the daughters of Tzlofchad. They are 5 sisters who, in the Parsha, they approach Moshe with a challenge to the laws of inheritance. They say, since our father has no sons, let us inherit his portion. Give us his portion when we enter the land of Israel. Now, we won't read this part of the story, so I'm not supposed to talk about it. But the 5 sisters are introduced in the section of the Torah, of the Parsha that we will read this morning as part of the triennial cycle, so I can talk about it. And the introduction to these women is a little bit surprising because it comes in a lengthy passage that we will read, which is a description of the 3rd and final census of Bnei Israel, of the people of Israel in the wilderness. Now, unlike the previous counts of the nation, this one is not only for the purpose of ascertaining how many men are of military age in anticipation of wars that will need to be fought when the nation comes to enter the land, but it is also for the purpose of apportioning land to each family, not just each tribe, but each family, each ancestral household, each clan that is part of each tribe. So the text gives us a very long list, longer than the previous censi, that we have read. And it names not only the leaders of each tribe, but also the heads of each household within each tribe. And then in this very long list of names, the text tells us, Tzlofchad, the son of Chefer, had no sons, only daughters. And their names were Machla, Noah, Hagla, Milcah, and Tirzah. So this is odd. Why? The Torah doesn't go off on tangents and give us irrelevant details. It seems like this is not really something that is relevant to the census that we're in the middle of reading. So these women are not going to be apportioned land. They're women. At this point, the law is that only men will be apportioned land and will inherit land from their fathers. So why include the names of people who cannot inherit in a list of inheritors? So I think this verse is here to prime us. It's here to ensure that when we do get to the story next year, we will perk up our ears and we will pay close attention. We will say, I know those names. I just heard those names. Let me pay close attention to what I'm about to read. And in this way, the Torah is suggesting or foreshadowing the significance of the case of Benot Tzlofchad, which I think is significant on a number of levels. First of all, they win their case for themselves. They bring their case to Moshe. Moshe goes to God, and God replies, Ken Benot Tzlofchad dovrot. The daughters of Tzlofchad, their words, what they say is, Cain, yes, it's just, it's right, it's the thing to do, yes. Naton titen lahem achuzat nachala betoch achei avihem. Naton titen, they will surely be given. This is like a doubling of language that the Torah uses when it wants to emphasize. So God is saying, yes, 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 they are right. So their case is significant because they won for themselves. And their case is significant because beyond what they asked for, beyond what Moshe brought to God, God extends this right to all the nation in perpetuity. El b'nei Yisrael tidaber lemor, speak to the entire nation of Israel and say, if a man dies without leaving a son, you shall transfer his property to his daughter. So the second level of significance of their case is that God changes the law. God changes the law for all time. There's a third significance, or a third level of significance, that I think is implied, but it's made explicit by a very beautiful contemporary midrash by the scholar Rivka Lubitch. She writes this midrash. It's included in the compilation called Dir Shuni of midrashim by contemporary women. And she imagines a conversation about this case that shows us how Benot Tzlofchad are saying something about the nature of law itself. Not just this particular law, but the nature of Torah, the nature of law. Lubitch envisions another biblical daughter named Tanot speaking to God about the case. Tanot asked God, if the daughters of Tzlofchad spoke the truth, why did you not write it that way in your Torah? Seeing that you are truth. Your Torah is truth, and your word endures forever. It's a good question. I see some heads nodding. It's a good question. It's a good challenge, right? If they were right, God, why didn't you just make it like this from the beginning? The Torah just could have been like this from the outset. And they have a little back and forth about this question, including another challenge that Tanot brings, where she says, citing a pasuk from Tehillim, from Psalms, Torat Adonai Timimah. God's Torah is Timimah. It is perfect, it is pure. It's not such an easy word to translate, but there's something that's already whole about it, that word suggests. So if your Torah is Timimah, like, how can you change it? And then at the end of this midrash, God declares, there is a truth that descends from the heavens, and there is a truth that springs up from below. Happy is the generation in which the truth from above meets the truth from below. As it is said, also a verse from Tehillim, Emet me'eretz titzmach, v'tzedek mishamayim nishkaf. Truth shall spring forth from the earth, and righteousness shall look down from heaven. What God is saying here is that there is another source of truth that was not included in the original truth as revealed at Sinai. It's a truth that comes from the earth, literally from the grassroots. It comes up, and it can become part of the truth of the God-given Torah. So the Midrash is saying, and again, I think this is implicit in the story of Benot Tzlafchad, but Lubitsch is saying it so beautifully, explicitly, that the foundational document of our people, the Torah, is telling us, I'm not complete. I can change, I can be amended. And one of the ways that I can be amended is when the experience, the lived experience of an individual member of the community reveals a truth that was not yet included. Embedded in the Torah is the idea that the Torah itself is limited. And it offers us the possibility of change by acknowledging that it is limited, that it is incomplete. But it is complete. It is complete. It is Timimah. It is whole, perfect in its very incompleteness, because it is acknowledging its incompleteness. So there are things that we don't yet see and we don't yet know that will come to be part of the Torah. So you can see why, when I read the profile of Elizabeth Freeman this morning, I thought of how connected it is to the story that we are introduced to in our reading this morning. Because both situations have women, people who were at the margins of their communities, and Freeman even more so as a Black woman and as a slave. That people at the margins experienced a truth that they were able to bring forward that came up from the ground, from the grassroots, and met the Torah, the law that had been determined from up above, and created that change. And I would say that, I'm not going to exactly compare the Torah to the Constitution, but that our Constitution, like the Torah, itself is meant to be a document that will change, that it is a living document that can be amended, again, based on the lived experience of people who their stories and their values and their concerns and their discrimination was not yet known or conceived of at the time of the writing. This is a beautiful description of the Constitution that President Franklin Roosevelt gave to the American people on September 17th, 1937, Constitution Day. He wrote, when the framers were dealing with what they rightly considered eternal values, eternal verities, unchangeable by time and circumstance, they used specific language. In no uncertain terms, for instance, they forbade titles of nobility, the suspension of habeas corpus, and the withdrawal of money from the treasury except after appropriation by law. But when they considered the fundamental powers of the new national government, they used generality, implication, and statement of mere objectives as intentional phrases which flexible statesmanship of the future within the Constitution could adapt to time and circumstance. Now, there are people who disagree with this assessment of the Constitution. I am not a constitutional lawyer, but were I one, I would probably not be among the originalists who see things a little bit different than Roosevelt does. But I find this to be true, and there are plenty of people who are constitutional lawyers who find this to be true and understand that our Constitution was always intended to be a living document, to be open to change and possibility. So Freeman's case is an example of that. I think perhaps the first example of that. And time again, we have seen how the lived experience, the truth, the voices, often from the margins, have risen up to meet the truth that has come down from on high. This is how Roosevelt ended his speech. We revere it, the Constitution, not because it is old, but because it is ever new, not in the worship of its past alone, but in the faith of the living who keep it young, now and in the years to come. I believe that we are blessed. We are blessed as Jews to be inheritors of a living Torah, a Torah that knows that it needs to change. We can debate the ways in which it can be changed and should be changed. But at its core, I think that our Parsha is one of many places, in fact, where we see how the Torah was always intended to be a living document. And we are blessed as Americans. I do believe that even with all of the challenges and injustices and despair that many of us are seeing and experiencing right now, that we are blessed to live in a country whose founding documents do believe in justice and the possibility for change, for new truth to emerge. And so I pray on this very special 4th of July, as we mark 250 years of this country, that we always come to understand our Torah as a living Torah, and that in this country, all of us will see a day when our Constitution and our founding documents are embraced as they should be, as living documents that help us reach the aspirations of the highest values that they describe. Shabbat Shalom.